What's up guys, it's Manga time once again. I'm here to bring you my review of Bleach 637 Baby Hold Your Hand. And if this isn't one of the weirdest, strangest Bleach chapters I have ever read in my entire life, then I don't know what is. Because this chapter is so weird. In a good way. In a good way. It's an incredibly interesting chapter. We finally get what Pernida looks like under the hood, and I like it for the most part. I have a couple of issues with it, but we'll get into that in the review. But yeah, let's get on with it then. So it starts off with Mayuri, and the first couple of pages, you might think these seem a bit pointless. They seem a bit fillerish until the Pernida reveal, but actually I think it's more foreshadowing. Basically, Mayuri's like, oh, you know, it's amazing that you can still move your eyes, Kenpachi, despite the fact that I've paralysed you. You're definitely quite the monster. And then Mayuri's like, you know, you allowed me to discover the enemy's power as well as a way to improve Ashisoki Jizo. You know, I can't help but feel gratitude towards you. And basically, we then get what I think is more foreshadowing, that Mayuri is really being set up for a hard loss, a really bad fall. Basically, you know, Yumichika turns to Nemu and he's like, your captain's always the same. And Nemu says, you know, yes, so I hope. And Yumichika says, what do you mean? And then we get this kind of, this eye shot of Nemu that's a bit almost ominous. And then she says, you know, I exactly what I said. So she hopes that Mayuri is always the same. And what I think this means is that, you know, Nemu knows Mayuri better than anyone else. And she hopes that Mayuri stays the same because then he won't lose. But Mayuri's not staying the same. Throughout this whole chapter, Mayuri is actually quite obviously changing in his demeanour towards the enemy. You know, he's becoming very, very careless because he's becoming excited at the prospect of this new kind of experiment. And, you know, that's highlighted a couple of times in the chapter, but we'll get there in a minute. But that beginning bit, I think, is definitely foreshadowing that Mayuri is going to be hit hard. Just like the beginning of last week's chapter foreshadowed Kenpachi being smacked down, as well as a bit of Mayuri. This one is all about Mayuri, probably, I think, going to be losing this battle. Anyway, Mayuri then says, you know, he then turns his attention back to Pernida, and he's like, he basically says, you know, thanks to the noble sacrifice of our captain, we've managed to work out your power. And you know, do you understand what that means? You know, even though you're not replying, I now that I know your powers, basically, you may as well. He basically it's this very roundabout way of saying, you know, I'm going to beat you in a way, because he basically says Kenpachi's sacrifice was so noble, because, you know, you should show your respect for that nobility by donating your body to me for my experiments. And I love his face here when he says this, because it's very, very old school Mayuri, and the really creepy face as he's like saying, you know, just give me your body for my experiments. Pernida doesn't seem to like this much, however, and the cloak rips apart, and Mayuri's face is like, oh, this is, and I was like, oh crap, this is gonna be good. And I turned the page, and needless to say, I was a little bit surprised. Okay, more than a little bit. I was very surprised. Pernida is actually a hand. A literal hand sitting there like that, with a huge eye in the centre. It's got two pupils, chains coming off of its fingers. And I was like, holy crap. It's the left arm of the Soul King. Which is cool. No, seriously, that is very cool. I'm actually very, very happy to see this. Mayuri guesses straight away this is the left arm of the Soul King. And I'm perfectly happy with this. It's very weird, and there are definitely a couple of inconsistencies that I will talk about in a second. But basically, Pernida breaks the chains that were binding it. So I don't know why they were binding it. We'll probably find out. But it had chains connecting each of its fingernails, and it shatters them. And then when it does that, it starts to grow. And, you know, presumably the reason it was bound was because Yuhava didn't want it to turn into the full arm. So again, I'm going to start by bringing up the inconsistencies. 599, the chapter Pernida first appeared. Pernida did not look like a hand. You know, there was literally no indication that Pernida could have been a hand whatsoever. In the most recent chapters, Pernida has appeared as, the fingers have kind of appeared more in the head. And in fact, at the end of 2 chapters ago, I think lots of people, myself included, thought that Pernida looked like a hand coming out of the cloak. But I think most people thought that was maybe just being a coincidence. Apparently not. But yeah, back in 599, Pernida looks nothing like a hand. It looks well, I can't say she anymore. It's definitely it looks nothing like a hand. And also, the biggest inconsistency, the inconsistency that really makes me think Kubo actually had no idea what Pernida was going to be, is that Pernida shows a hand. In 599, when Senjumaru summons the giant soldier, this human hand literally comes out of Pernida's cloak, and it's like, now that doesn't make any sense. There is no hand. Pernida is a massive hand. She has no human hands of her own. So that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And maybe Kubo will find some way of explaining this. I'm not sure, but yeah, for the time being, that makes literally no sense. However, more inconsistencies again is in 599 again. Basically, they all occur around the time Pernida was first revealed. When they emerge from the shadows, Pernida is basically the same size as Askin, but later on, Pernida is drawn obviously very small, and that's because she's just a hand. But either way, the inconsistencies aside, I'm very happy that Pernida is the left arm of the Soul King, because it's very interesting, and the Soul King is clearly going to play a bigger role than Kubo has shown off so far, because otherwise he wouldn't keep bringing up the limbs, and I love that he has them. Lots of people did theorise correctly, myself included, that when Ukitake did the whole Mimihagi thing, that there would be more limbs lying around, and it certainly seems like they are. The Soul King definitely appears to be a very, very strange being. Mimihage, we didn't see the proper arm, we saw the spirit of the arm. The proper arm was the one that approached Ukitake when he was ill as a child, and it has like some kind of clasp on its wrist. This one, the left arm doesn't. The left arm is just fucking ginormous, apparently. Basically, what happens is when it breaks its seal, the chains, which I presume Yuhava put on it, but again, it's impossible to say at the moment, it grows ginormous, and there's a frankly amazing panel of it, like, gazing down at Yumichiko and Ikako, and everything's shadowed. It honestly looks incredible. But yeah, so Mayuri is now facing off against the left arm of the Soul King, which, in my opinion, is bad news for Mayuri. As if he wasn't in trouble anyway. It's really bad news. And basically, Michiko and Ikako are like, let's get the hell out of here, as you rightly should. Nemu doesn't go with them, not that we see anyway, which I think is interesting as well. Another thing to bring up is Mimihage only had one pupil in its eye, and Pernida has 2. So, yeah, we're seeing the evolution. And the fact that Pernida is the left arm of the Soul King, in my opinion, only reinforces my theory that the Soul King is actually a Quincy, because of the whole True Eyes thing. So yeah, this is a really crazy chapter, and the fact that Pernida is the left arm has huge ramifications, in my opinion, for not only the character, but the fight and where the series is going as well. Mayuri brings up the question, why are you working for Yuhava? And I think it's a very, very valid question. Why is Pernida working for Yuhava? I think we get some reasoning for this towards the end of the chapter, leading into next week, but I'll get to that in a minute. Basically, Ikako and the others run away, and Pernida shoots its nerves at Mayuri again. And Mayuri brings up this really fucking weird umbrella thing with a face on it, which, as it gets hit by the nerves, is screaming. Very typical Mayuri that he would create an umbrella that could scream when it gets hurt. Anyway, Mayuri's like, this is absolutely fascinating, but, why are you working for Yuhava? And I'm really intrigued. And Ikaku's like, get out of there, Kuretsuji, what are you doing? And this is all leading into why I think Mayuri's in trouble. Mayuri is not showing the same care and analytical strategy that he generally does in his fights. He's literally standing out in the open going, attack me, I want to see what you can do. And I think that's bad news for him. I think he's completely underestimating Pernida, and he's just going to get shown up for it. That's one thing about Mayuri. He doesn't tend to underestimate his opponents. But now that he's super excited about having this new thing he's never seen before. He's just going to completely let it go to his head. And I think that's, again, reinforced by Ikkaku going, "What are you doing? Come and run and be safe." And Mayuri's just like, how can I do that? I'm so happy to see this new thing for the first time ever. It's incredible. Then we find out that Pernida can actually talk, and Pernida's like, happiness, and then it speaks in like ellipsis. We still don't have an answer to what I said last week about the fact that Pernida generally did its power by speaking. But seriously, like I'm not able to do pictures on the cutting at the moment because my laptop's decided to break because it's a piece of crap. But yeah, if you go and look back at chapter 599, you'll see what I mean about it. It's very, very hard to imagine that Pernida as this Pernida, if that makes sense. But anyway, regardless, Mayuri stands there and he tanks the nerves with the umbrellas, and basically, Mayuri's like, I didn't expect you to be able to talk, and he's like, well, I theorised that if Ukitake had made a contract with the right arm, there would be a left arm around somewhere. And he also says that Ukitake only fell unconscious, which is really, really good news. A lot of people are going to be happy about that, myself included. Ukitake apparently not dead, and if anyone's going to know, Mayuri's going to know. So that's very good news, in my opinion. And in fact, now that the opponent has been revealed as the Soul King's left arm, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Ukitake shows up to fight it, because, he is part of this Soul King storyline. I still think he's going to show up with Ginjo. I think Ginjo's going to come and talk to him first when he gathers consciousness again, and then they'll show up maybe. But that's just a prediction for further on down the line. Anyway, the chapter ends rather strangely, and I think it gives us a slight hint into why Pernida is working for Yahava. Pernida says, "Left arm, name, wrong. My name is Pernida. Pernida." And that's the end of the chapter. Either Yahava has completely brainwashed the left arm of the Soul King into believing it's something else called Pernida, or the left arm has its own sentience and wants to be this Quincy known as Pernida rather than the left arm. Either way, that kind of explains why it's working for Yahava. Things are a bit weird though. There's so many things that are weird about this. One, in the first fight, Oetsu technically murders the left arm of the Soul King, which I think is quite funny. Two, why did Pernida not react in the slightest during the whole Mimihage thing? Now, I know technically like the Schutzstaffel didn't show up until the end of that segment, but they were still there when Yahava ripped Mimihage off the Soul King and all that sort of thing. So I'm leaning slightly more towards Pernida being brainwashed, and that she doesn't have any idea as what's going on. She doesn't even really know that she's a hand. I can't get it out of my system to stop calling her a she. That's another thing. Now that Pernida is actually a genderless being, although it's technically a man if it's part of the Soul King, I really feel like one of the elite Sternritter should have been a girl. But just because most of the Vandenreich girls have been, in my opinion, not that great, and we haven't had a single serious girl in the Vandenreich, which I think is a shame. But anyway, so Pernida, I think, could be brainwashed. I think that's possibly the most likely thing. And hopefully, I think we're almost guaranteed a flashback for Pernida now that we know it's the left hand of the Soul King. Hopefully we'll find out more about the Vandenreich's brainwashing process. But yeah, either way, honestly, it was a pretty good chapter, but only for the reveal of Pernida alone. See, this is my problem with this week's chapter. Before we get the reveal, it's basically foreshadowing for Mayuri. After the reveal, nothing really happens. Nothing really happens after Pernida gets revealed as a hand. Seriously, you look back at this chapter and nothing really happens after that. So I'm going to give the chapter. I really liked the reveal, but at the same time, the reveal brings about a lot of inconsistencies. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was a good chapter this week, but we need answers as to how Pernida could possibly be this hand. Seriously, you go back and look at 599, it doesn't look like a hand. I'm sorry. And it brings out its own hand. That's the biggest kick in the teeth to this whole hand thing. Pernida has hands back then, so, whatever, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. But I definitely think Mayuri is setting himself up for a fall. I'd love Ukitake to come up and join in this whole thing with the Soul King's arms. So apparently there must be some Soul King legs running around somewhere. It's going to be very weird when we see those eventually because um, at least a hand can be kind of cool. If an enemy comes up against a foot, it's going to be like, okay, that's a bit lame. But maybe the Soul King's a giant, otherwise I don't understand why Pernida would be massive. But then, you know what, I'm really thinking now, the Soul King, I'm going off on a massive tangent here, but the Soul King subplot is one of the most interesting things in Bleach at the moment. I really think maybe the limbless Soul King that was inside the crystal might just be like a host. There might be a real Soul King around that's like a giant. That'd actually be kind of cool. Because Mimi Hage's massive when it's the black version, and Pernida's huge as well. So, yeah, I'm actually very interested. And Pernida probably isn't going to die anytime soon. If Kubo's sticking to his fights in a similar fashion to how he did in the second part of the invasion, like with Asnot and that lot, Pernida's fight will end on chapter 640, because it started on 635, and Kubo's been doing that. But I really don't think Pernida's going to die by then. If anything, 640 might be when Mayuri gets defeated and then someone else comes in or something like that. We'll have to see. But yeah, either way, very interested to see where this fight goes now. This fight just took a very interesting turn. I have to admit, I didn't really see the hand thing coming. And honestly, it's one of the more, it definitely probably at least one of the most interesting things it could have been. But yeah, we're going to need to... we're going to need some things clearing up, Kubo, okay? We're going to need some things clearing up. But yeah, 3.5 out of 5, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week's pretty crazy chapter of Bleach. It was a weird chapter. When I first read it, and I was like, baby, hold your hand. What the hell does that mean? And then it obviously becomes clearer later on. But let me know what you thought about Pernida Park and Jazz's actual identity being the Soul King's left arm. You know, how did you Harvar even get a hold of that? You know, that's the thing. We need some serious answers. But yeah, guys, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week's chapter. Do you think Mayuri is in for a loss like I do? Do you think his fate is going to be sealed? Let me know, guys. And as always, please subscribe. I'd super appreciate the support. And give this video a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, see ya.